Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here, and welcome to another review. And now, after having looked at some 16-bit titles over the last couple of days, now I'm taking a look at an 8-bit title once again. This time I'm looking at the Spectrum 48K version of Ocean Software's Match Day from 1984, which was considered to be one of the best football games on the system. John Rittman and Chris Clark were responsible for it, as you can see by this title page. And it looks like John also did that illustration, hence his name in the bottom right corner there. So let's get this football game on the road and see how it works out in 2020. Nice little picture of a cup there, and here's our main menu with 5 different options. There's 1 and 2 player single match. Match Day Special is the built-in cup. You can have up to 8 players. Some of whom can be computer controlled, but you don't have to have computer controlled players if you don't wish to, according to the menu options further down. So also change match details. You can have 5, 15 or 45 minutes halves. God, can you imagine playing that? And difficulty level versus if a computer opponent. Obviously, the closer you are to international, the harder the team are going to be to beat. Number of players in the cup and whether or not there are computer opponents in the cup. So, for brevity's sake and for this review, we'll keep it 5 minutes per half. And you can change team names. So I'm not going to actually do that, but if you wanted to name a team after your favourite football team, you can do that. But we'll just get on with playing a 1-player single match for the benefit of this review. And you can change all sorts of aspects like team colours. So that in the top left and top right is what the team colours currently are, and you can change all sorts of aspects of that. So symbol shift changes the colours. You can change the border, and you can change the border colour, but I think we'll keep it black. So you've got all these different options of pitch and player colours. So nice bit of customization for a game this early on in the Spectrum's life, and not just that, generally in gaming. I think that's a nice, comfortable colour. So that's, and you can change the game controls. So I'm going to select the keyboard for. So actually, I'm quite happy with QWLP and C. So I'm gonna and you can pause the game as well. You can see in the bottom right corner. But I'm just gonna kick off. Now, don't worry, the graphics aren't really that blocky all the time. And then you got that famous theme tune that you probably heard loads of times whenever a football match has appeared on television. Nice animation on the footballers there. And I'm the one in with I'm the one in the cyan and and the white socks. Although with one exception, the player I'm controlling, the socks change colour to the rest of it. Usually that's the player nearest to the ball. The ball sticks to your feet in this, and when you've got the ball, you can't move as fast as if you didn't have it due according to the manual to the need to control the ball. And for some reason, the CPU-controlled opponents decided to hoof it off for no apparent reason. And you've got control over where you throw it instead. There are no fouls or sliding tackles in this game. It's a very early title. Sound effects are a bit sparse, but you've got to bear in mind this was a 48K Spectrum, and sound capabilities for the 48K Spectrum were a bit limited. I mean, well, they were very limited. And little bit of colour clash, unfortunately, and you can actually choose between kicking the ball in the air or kicking it high. If you want to kick it along the ground, you need to not be moving when you press the button to kick, which will be the fire button if you're using a joystick. If you're actually moving forward when you do it, then you will kick it in the air. And that's their throwing, because one of my players was the last one to touch it. Oh, I didn't manage to dive in time. You control your keeper, and you'll know whether you're in control of him because his knees will bend. The moment you see his knees bend, you're in control of him. Ugh. See, because he's got the ball, I'm moving faster than him. Now, I stopped moving so I could pass the ball along the ground like that. Had I kept moving, it would have gone up in the air. So you do need to pass because, as I said, you can't move as quickly if you've actually got the ball in your possession. There's no after touch or anything like that. They didn't really have that kind of thing in football games in those days. He saved that. That's my throw in because their goalie was the last one to touch it. Damn it, I've got out of the way. It can be a little bit of a pain to have to stop moving just to pass the ball along the ground, but given the limitations of the software at the time, I don't really think they could have done it much other way. Remember that most, if not all, of the 8-bit computers of this era only had single button joysticks. There are sort of headers in this, but they're not really dedicated. Just a case of if it hits your head, then it hits your head and bounces off you accordingly. And there's a clock in the top right corner showing how many minutes of match time you've had. Oh, dash, I didn't quite read that correctly. Slows down a little bit when there are a lot of players on screen, but for a 1984 game, this has got brilliant animation. And the ball mechanics seem pretty good as well. I thought I was controlling that guy down in the bottom right, but no, I was controlling the guy in the top left. You don't have any control over who you control. It's whoever's nearest the ball, or at the very least most likely to get the ball. You don't have any control. It's not like some games where you can actually press fire or something to switch to another player. You can't do that in this, unfortunately. They didn't really have that kind of thing happening in when this came out. Worrying, they're one goal up, and I haven't been able to. Oh, I didn't time that correctly again. And he hoofed it off. I really need to get an equaliser. Oh, he got in my way. That's my throw in again. In case you're wondering whether or not there are corners in this, yes, there are. One complaint is that the general pace of match day might be a bit slow paced by today's standards, but for its time, this was pretty revolutionary, especially with those customization options which I showed you earlier. Oh God! And look at this. Look how he's reading my movements as if they're mechanical. And then we start second half and we'll be swapping sides. That's the only time, the start of each half is the only time you get to see the referee. And we swap sides, so now I'm playing from right to left. So that's why my players are going off to the right now. Unfortunately, you can't skip this. And you can kick the ball in all 8 of the main directions. Damn it. My throw in. Generally, the AI of the players you're not controlling on your team seems to be pretty good. They don't seem to be doing anything outlandishly stupid from what I can make out, which is always a big plus, especially for a game of this vintage. The goal kick here. The only thing that doesn't make sense is that it's not the goalie that's actually taking it, but for goal kicks, you can kick further than a regular player would have been able to, so that's something. Come on, get on it, you bugger. Hey, good. See what I mean? I sort of did a header there. I didn't quite read where that ball landed correctly. You have to be pretty precise with... Oh, that does annoy me. Oh, he deflected it. Another slight niggle is when there are a lot of people in the way, it can be a bit hard to make out where the ball is. Yeah, so this is definitely better if if you're up against a human opponent. The computer opponent's a bit too good with its angles and reading what the human controlled player is doing, so saved that. Oh, didn't manage to dive in time. It's pretty hard to do them. Notice how they're shaking their hands in victory. So even having victory poses in a 1984 game, that is quite something. So you can, if you take it for the time in which it came out, you can sort of understand why it got such acclaim, especially in this Spectrum version. Because I have seen footage of the Commodore 64 and Amstrad versions, and they play really quite slowly. By comparison, this seems to do a better job of keeping a reasonably decent pace. Oh, you see what you can do with it. No, when they're the two players close to each other, it's really annoying when it doesn't give you, when it's a bit random as to which. Oh, off the blooming crossbar. Oh, he got in my way. See, the computer opponents read the human player a bit too well to really, which is a little bit of a shame, but I guess there was a limit to what they could do with 48 kilobytes of RAM in those days. Oh, darn it, I miskicked that. Ooh, I think can I get it? Oh, he saved it. I don't think I'm going to win this one. I don't think I've got enough time to get 2 goals before the 90th minute. See it bounce off his head just then. It's good that it's got a shadow on the ball, so you've got a very good idea of where the ball is. It's just a shame sometimes when there are people in the way of the ball, it's a bit hard to make out exactly where it is because of the players getting in each other's way, and of course the ever-present issues with the Spectrum's attribute limitations. See a nice bit of passing there. So clever passing is definitely doable in this game, despite how far back it dates. Oh, God. Yeah. As I said, sound effects are a bit sparse. They couldn't really do white noise on the 40. That's timed that right that time. So I managed to save that, but I'm still going to lose this match. The computer plays a pretty challenging game, even on the lowest difficulty setting, because of how easily it manages to read what the human players are doing. So nearly time up. The last minute's coming up in a moment. Yes, that's the final score. The computer beat me by 2 goals to nothing, or nil. So that's match day for the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. While it has somewhat aged a little, and it's slightly hampered by limitations of hardware at the time, it still plays a reasonably smooth game of football, and it doesn't run so slowly that it becomes tedious. And there's none of that annoying music that was in Arctic's World Cup football from around the same era. God, that music was horrible. And anyway, back to match day. Graphics very nice for the time. The animation's super smooth, and I think for the Spectrum they did an acceptable job of the overall visuals. Sound is sparse, but it's 48K Spectrum, so you can't really be too mean on it for that, especially for a game that was released still relatively in the Spectrum's infancy. Gameplay, well, playability is pretty good. It's got 2 different types of kick, which would have been quite revolutionary for an 8-bit computer in 1984, I expect. As in, if you press the kick button while you're not moving, your player will pass it along the ground, whereas he kicks it in the air if you are moving when you press the kick button. Bear in mind that unlike the consoles, computers tended to only have 1-button joysticks, so doing anything more extravagant than that, even with more RAM available, would have been a bit of a problem. But there wasn't more RAM available. 48K was the maximum that Spectrum had at the time. If you can play against a human-controlled opponent, do, because I think you'll find it a little bit more enjoyable. And so, what am I going to give Match Day? Well, for its time, it's pretty impressive, and it well, because there isn't any aftertouch or fouls or anything like that. Bearing in mind this is a game that came out in 1984. Time hasn't been massively kind to it, and it has obviously been superseded by other football games since, even on the same platform. I mean, including its own sequel, Matchday 2. But I think I'm going to give Matchday on the Spectrum 7 out of 10. It's probably more of a curiosity piece than anything, and it set the standards for football games that followed it, at least for a little while, and it still runs fairly really smoothly and does the bare minimum of what you could reasonably expect from a football game of that era, and expands on it slightly by allowing you to have two different types of kick and being able to do three different things with the goalkeeper when you take control of him, and it does have quite a few customization features, which for a 1984 game is pretty impressive. So 7 out of 10 for Matchday on the Spectrum. Hope you enjoyed that review. Catch you on another one soon. Texie88 out.